Okay, so today we're going to talk about how we can use Post-it notes with fractions. And so Post-it notes is a really good resource for kids to get in the habit of talking about fractions. And the reason for that is because they're all the same size. And so for students, oftentimes they like to draw their models, and sometimes they draw them just one's a little slightly bigger, and when they go to compare them, they get a little confused. And so Post-its kind of help them to keep those two the same size. And so there's three kind of main components that we can kind of talk about with utilizing fractions, especially in third grade. The first is beginning with identifying. So if they have a Post-it, you can give them a fraction and they can make that model on the Post-it note. So for instance, if you said 1/4, they could have that Post-it, they could show this fraction on there. So based on the denominator of 4, they're going to partition or split that Post-it into 4 sections. And then because the numerator is 1, the top number is 1, they're going to go ahead and shade one of those parts. So this would be a model to represent 1/4. Same over here for 2/3. Again, the 3 on the denominator shows how many parts it need to be split into, and that 2 shows how many need to be shaded. So this gets the foundation of fractions and using Post-it notes. Then we can move into talking about equivalent fractions. If two fractions are the same, and so this, you could maybe give them a statement. These are two statements that show two equivalent fractions, but you could also give them a false statement and say, hey, say if it's true or false. So I said like 1/2 and 2/4, see if they're equivalent. And so a way that you could test that is first start with your small fraction of 1/2. And so I would separate it into your two parts, and shading 1/2 of them. And then in order to see if it's equivalent with 2/4, I would then separate it into 4 parts instead. And if it's separated into 4 parts now, and 2 of them are shaded still, then that shows that 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent. So this model would prove then that 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent. Because because I still have my 4 parts and my 2 are still shaded, and that's the same as 1/2. Over here with 3/4, I could do the same thing. I could start with my 4 and shading in my 3 of them because of my numerator. And then now I can switch it to 8 pieces instead of 4. So I could separate here and separate here. Now I have 8 pieces, and to see if 3/4 and 6/8 is equivalent, I could check my 8 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I need to see if 6 of them are shaded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them are shaded, so 3/4 and 6/8 are 2 equivalent fractions. So that's a way to use Post-its for comparing or for equivalent. Now we can move into comparing. So for instance, you could give your kiddo 2 fractions and see which one's greater or equal to or less than, things like that, using those symbols. We used to call them alligator symbols sometimes. And so these are your symbols that you can use. This is going to be your greater than symbol, your less than symbol, or your equal to symbol that you can put in between 2 fractions there. Okay, so over here, I used 2 different Post-its. So over here I would have 1/2, again separating based on your denominator. So I have 2 parts. One of them is shaded because of my numerator of 1. Over here I have 4 parts because of my denominator of 4. And one of them is shaded because of my numerator of 1. Now I can compare. And so we talk a lot about like a piece of cake, for instance. This Post-it is a piece of cake. And so if it's my favorite cake and it's something that I really, really want to eat, I'm going to want the one that is shaded the most of because that's the region that I get. And so if I'm looking at these, I'm going to get this piece or I'm going to get this piece. But if I'm really hungry and I want the most of it because it's my absolute favorite cake, I'm definitely going to want the 1/2 piece instead of the 1/4. So I would then put this sign of 1/2 is greater than 1/4. We also tell kids with those signs that we want the alligator mouth or the mouth of the animal or whatever to eat the bigger one, okay? Because the alligator or the animal wants to eat the biggest one. And then we go over here to 3/4, again separating it into 4 parts, shading your 3. And then you're going to compare it to 3/5. Color in 3. And go ahead and compare. 3/4 is greater than 3/5. This is a great, easy tool that your kids can work on at home using Post-it notes, giving them fractions, just having them identify. If you have some equivalent fractions that maybe you want to prove or have them disprove by using models is a great one. And then also giving them 2 fractions and having them compare, telling you which one is bigger, greater than or less than, depending on their model. Another thing that you can also do with this is have them order fractions. You could give them like 3 or 4, a list of fractions and have them show you the models of them and then have you tell them from least to greatest or have you even tell them greatest to least. Switching that up is always important with kids so they're not set in stone with a least to greatest or greatest to least. This is a great tool to use at home and especially an easy one.